How to ensure the Constitution is enforced. The reality of international practices reveals that many women's constitutional rights remain ink on paper. Many times, women's capability to defend their rights is deactivated by texts and conditions that limit their accessibility. However, constitutional design can offer solutions to these problems. Rights limitations. Governments may rely on many reasons to restrict some rights. These include the obligation to respect others' rights and the requirements of maintaining public order, national security, public health, and public morality. To restrict the possibility of the legislature or executive to interfere, the Constitution should require that any rights limitations specify the reasons that is relied on to limit the right, the content and extent of the right to be limited, whether it is a total or partial limitation, and the procedures to be followed to limit it. Limitations on rights must not themselves be unlimited, but should ensure that the limitation is to achieve the stated social objective, that the essence of the right is not affected by the limitation, that the limitation is proportional. Moreover, those affected by a rights limitation must be able to resort to courts for redress. Finally, certain fundamental rights cannot be derogated from: the prohibition of torture, inhuman or degrading treatment, the prohibition of slavery, and the non-retroactivity of criminal laws. State of emergency. The Constitution must contain controls to restrict the executive's power's capacity to limit rights when a state of emergency is declared. The following rules should be followed: stating the conditions under which states of emergency are declared, requiring that they be regulated by law and declared by a constitutionally lawful body, requiring that they be approved by the legislature, which should continue to exist during the state of emergency, making the declaration of a state of emergency reviewable by courts, limiting their application temporally and geographically, and stipulating protections for other branches of government, such as prohibiting the dissolution of Parliament, limiting the possibility to amend the Constitution, or to issue decrees that have the power of law. Access to courts. The Constitution should stipulate the individual right to access the courts, including the Constitutional Court, in order to defend their rights. Judicial independence. The Constitution should guarantee the principle of judicial independence, where the judicial power is regulated by the Constitution itself and not by ordinary legislation. Interpretation of the Constitution. Drafters can seek to guide future interpretations of the Constitution through several methods. They can also indicate the purpose behind the adoption of the Constitution within its preamble, explicitly mentioning women's rights, gender equality as an objective of the Constitution. Amendments to the Constitution. Drafters can limit the possibility to amend the Constitution by declaring certain principles and rights unamendable. One way to ensure an unamendable provision is interpreted in line with women's rights is to require that the interpretation relies on international human rights laws. The Constitution can impose higher thresholds for passing constitutional amendments, including a higher majority in Parliament and a requirement of a majority vote of the entire membership of Parliament, not just those present.